And welcome to this edition of Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, your host, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray. How are you?
I'm all right, Keith. How are you today?
I am good. I am good. We've got a special guest with us today. But before we get started, this is something, this has been kind of a historic week in our country and around the world with the COVID vaccine coming on board. And I was struck about something that I saw on the news report this week that kind of reminded me of something to do with Oak Ridge history. And that is that in a typical vaccination development process, they would go step by step. And, they would finish one step and they would move to the next one, then they would move to the next one. But because they wanted to get it done so quickly because of the pandemic, they overlapped those steps. So in other words, they were developing, they were producing finished vaccines before the vaccine was approved by the FDA. That kind of reminded me of when they built K25. They built K25. They spent $500 million on K25. And this was before that they had the barrier material working. So they weren't even sure that they were going to be able to do anything. And I think in one of the documentaries that we've done, we talked about Groves thinking that, K25 might be the biggest white elephant of the whole war because, if they couldn't develop the barrier material, then it wouldn't work and it would be a total waste of time and money. It just kind of reminded me, of 70 something years ago of the same thing happened in our country. And fortunately it all worked out. But anyway, that was, I wanted to throw back to kind of relate today what's going on with the pandemic and the vaccine development to what happened, in Oak Ridge, so many years ago.
It is similar. Of course, there's a lot of differences, but that time period back there, Groves was facing a worldwide catastrophe. I mean, people were dying in the war. 60 million people. But not only did he do the K25 and not knowing if it would work because they couldn't get the barrier material just right.
Sure.
He also started the thermal diffusion plant and had the electromagnetic plant, a separation plant, Y12.
Yeah.
Had those three processes going, and they even looked at centrifuges. Mm-hmm. And if they could have figured out a way to spin those centrifuges fast enough, they would have tried that as well.
Yeah.
So yes, he was going down multiple tracks at the same time, looking for that end result, something that would get that material needed for atomic bomb. So it is some similarities about how it's being done.
Just like the vaccine, just like the 6 different vaccines that they've been working on, hoping that 1 or 2 or 3 of them will step up to the front and work. So anyway, that's just a point I wanted to make. Ray, we've got special guests with us today. Why don't you introduce?
Sure. We're glad today to have Wade Creswell with us. Wade works at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He's their community engagement manager. And Wade's got something to share with us today that I think folks will be really interested in. If you've ever wanted to tour the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, you can now do that in the comfort of your home, right on your computer. So Wade, we're glad to have you with us today. Tell us a little bit about what you've got.
Thank you, Ray. I can't tell you how honored and appreciative I am to be invited to join you guys today. And Keith, just to touch on your point, when we had the opportunity to give tours, particularly of the Graphite Reactor in person, the point that I always tried to drive home was that the size, the scale, and the scope within the timeline that it was accomplished for the Manhattan Project was something that had never happened before, or probably wouldn't ever happen again.
Yep.
Yeah.
But your point is so valid, and this may be the first time in history in the last 77 years that anything could even relate to that. You could even point to something that was similar in the size and scale and scope within the timeline that is relevant to what happened during the Manhattan Project. So I haven't looked at it that way, but that's a great point that we'll include when we start talking about our tours from now on, because COVID research has been a focus of ours across the lab since before March, before we all went home.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. But touching on your point, Ray, first of all, thank you for inviting me and the chance to share what we've really been working hard on. Multiple people across the lab have been working hard to increase our capability to do virtual tours for multiple reasons. I mean, this is something that was in the back of our minds before we all went home for COVID, but it certainly became more pertinent and relevant and needed since we can't do tours right now. And it's probably going to be some time before we can bring visitors back on campus as well. In fact, about 70% of lab employees are still working from home and will be for the foreseeable future. So building out the virtual capability to show our world-class facilities, particularly our user facilities, was something that that was instrumental, that was absolutely essential, actually, toward helping us continue to be able to do our job in community relations. You know, one of our key focuses, one of our primary ways of reaching out to the community is through K through 12 STEM education. And we bring student groups onto campus to see areas of research that were pertinent to what they were studying at the time. Well, we can't do that right now. But what we've been able to do since we've built out this virtual tour capability is to connect classrooms with specific interests from across the country with researchers who are the best at what they do in that particular field. So they can give a presentation and talk more about what they're doing, and then walk students through the labs or the facilities that they're using to do that particular research. So in a way, it's really opened up our capability to do some things with not just with students, but with community groups as well, to show some of our facilities in ways that we can't do in person. For example, our supercomputer summit. And I'll show you just a few minutes. I can take you to the observation window in person if we were allowed to be there in person, but we can't go past there. But in the virtual tour, we can walk all throughout the supercomputer itself, which would be a real privilege if you were there in person. So just to give you an idea about why we've done what we're doing, how we continue to build that capability out. And I'm looking forward to showing you some of that today.
So really, the thing about it is, Wade, is because of the virtual tours that you've built, even if the lab were open and accessible, we're able to see things in the virtual tour that we wouldn't see in person, even if we were able to be there.
Absolutely. Quite a few things, actually. I mean, you're able to put a camera. It's not that what you're seeing is classified. It's just that access to be there physically is restricted at the time.
Sure.
If you can turn off some of these facilities, or while they're off, if you can do the photography, then you can get into places that you couldn't be able to walk into any other time, really.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, before we start on the tour, let me ask you to elaborate just a little bit more on what the lab's involvement with COVID has been. Just talk a little about that. I think people will be interested to know just how engaged the laboratory has been and still is.
Absolutely. So, Ray, I appreciate you bringing this up, because obviously it's important to everybody right now. And it was certainly important to our lab leadership and to our researchers across the board. I mean, I saw some statistic, I can't remember what the number, but the number of papers, of research projects that have been initiated and even published to date is, again, something of a scale that we've never seen before in terms of research within the time frame that we've done. So the lab has been engaged in areas looking at the virus itself from so many different angles, from looking at it from a neutron scattering down to a molecular level, learning about the virus itself, to working with our GIS mapping to determine how people are moving and how the virus may be spreading, and things that could be done to contain it. We're going to take a tour, just a brief tour, whet your appetite, of the carbon fiber technology facility that was instrumental in scaling up the material to produce N95 masks. So working with our manufacturing demonstration facility and carbon fiber technology facilities, they were able to work with the inventor of the N95 masks and partner with local industry, not really local industry, but industry throughout the country to produce this type of material to create millions and millions of N95 masks. So those are just 3 ways. There's several others that are ongoing that we could certainly touch on. And we won't have time to go all the way into the videos today, but I can show you some of the videos that you can come back and look at later when we do some of these tours.
All right, very good. Keith, you have any other things before we get him started?
I think we're ready.
All right. So
All right.
I'm going to share my screen. I'm always a little afraid of technology when it comes to this. So bear with me. Let me make sure that this works. And tell me if you see a website.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Right. Fantastic. So this is Oak Ridge National Laboratory's official website. It's just ORNL.gov. If you go to that and mouse over at the very top of the screen, About Us. So I don't even have to click on it. I'm just mousing over it. It brings up this menu. And in the bottom left, you'll see Visit ORNL and then Interactive Map. If you click on Interactive Map, it will bring up a 3D overview of our main campus. So you can obviously make it smaller or larger if you want to zoom in. But this is the main campus on Bethel Valley Road at Oak Ridge National Lab. But there are multiple areas of Oak Ridge National Lab. This is just where the largest area of concentrated facilities are. If you go up to Maps and click on it, you can go to each different part of campus or even off campus. We have a couple of facilities. The carbon fiber technology facility is off campus as well. And then there's a Hardin Valley campus, which has 3 separate facilities. And we may have a chance to go at least show you what's there. It depends on time, how much time we have when we get into these. So let me back out of this a little bit. There we go. So if you're coming from Oak Ridge, just for reference, for example, this is Bethel Valley Road. So if you're coming from Oak Ridge and you turn on Scarborough and you go to the end of Scarborough and take a right, about a half a mile, you're going to come to a guard portal. And if you have access to the site, which we don't right now, except for the roughly 1,800 employees that are critical to the mission, whatever mission they may be working on at the time. If you have access, you can travel about 4 miles down Bethel Valley Road, and it'll bring you to the heart of campus, which is here. And if you've visited campus, you've probably parked here and gone into this building here, which is our visitor center and conference center. And that's where our badging occurs. This is the newer part of campus here, our quad, which is a beautiful area, much like a college campus, much more like a college campus than an employment setting. Traditional industrial or whatever comparison you could draw. But for all of the tours that I like to plan, I always like to start where it started. And that is at the X10 Graphite Reactor right here. Now, if you have had a chance to visit that, for example, if you visited the DOE public bus tours that are available out of the American Museum of Science and Energy when they're running, they're suspended right now as well. But hopefully soon we'll be able to resume. You've parked right here and you've walked up and over the hill and come in the door to the back side here. So to begin our virtual tours, we're just going to click on this facility. It'll give you some options over here and some photography, even some 360 photography. But what we're interested in are the virtual tours. So you click on Graphite Reactor Tour, and it brings you to this, just to click play, and it's going to open Matterport's platform for their photography, or the photography that we used for this platform to create the tour, and it's going to bring you right in the front door. Now, I do advise anybody that takes this tour to use a mouse. It's not that you can't. It's just that if you don't have a mouse and you're using a pad to navigate, it's just a little more awkward and not quite as seamless. So if you use a mouse, it's a lot more, it's just easier to navigate. These tours are designed for you to be able to walk in, see the facility themselves, and then there are points of information along the way, even videos. For example, if you stand right here in front of the mural that depicts the reaction of the technician on duty notifying the supervisors when the graphite reactor went critical on November 4th, 1943. You can stand here and watch a video of just some of the history, a 75-second history, a basic history of the graphite reactor itself. To the right, and I do want to show you the graphite reactor, but before we get there, there's a small history center that walks you through the timeline. And, you know, as we were talking about just a minute ago, what I like to talk about when I'm in the graphite reactor is that scope and the size of the project that happened within such a short period of time. And that's the story of these panels, really. You know, you're starting in 1939 to an end point for what it was produced for in 1945, really from 1942 to 1945. And that's what this timeline shows here. You know, from the beginning of the Manhattan Project here in 1942 until, you know, you come back out here and look around, the atomic bomb was dropped here in 1945. But there's one picture I love to show, and this, to me, this drives it home. I don't think anybody else has been impressed by this as I've been when I've showed it to them. But this picture right here obviously is of the graphite reactor, and this is why I like to show it. So the graphite reactor, Ray, went critical November 4th, 1943, right?
No, that's right.
Okay, so we're all East Tennesseans. You know, I like to turkey hunt, so I know there are leaves on the trees late April, early May. That's usually, so if you look back here, right, all the trees have leaves on them already. So this picture of just the frame of the graphite reactor, I mean, the framing process is ongoing, had to have been in May. So that means that the world's first continuously operating nuclear reactor went critical about 6 months after this picture was taken. And to me, that blows me away that that's even possible. And so I just like to use that picture to tell the overall story of what they accomplished in such an incredibly short period of time. Had never been matched before, and may have never been matched until now, maybe, with the vaccinations.
Yeah, it's kind of like,
that's
kind of like
a good observation.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's kind of like the new Chick-fil-A that they're building downtown Oak Ridge. It's gone up in like 2 weeks or something like that.
Miracles never cease.
That's true.
Actually, Wade, the construction for the laboratory started in February, actually on the 2nd of February, I believe. And then your observation about leaves on the trees is an excellent one, because you're right. That's by May, and by November they had it up running and gone critical. So we couldn't get the paperwork done today.
It would have taken 10 years to get to that point today. You know?
I hear you.
So anyway, this is a great place to come visit and get a sense of the history of the graphite reactor, not just leading up, you know, to the conclusion of World War II, but especially what's so important here related to the current lab operations is what the graphite reactor was used for after the war. The world's first radioisotopes were produced using this nuclear reactor that was at X10. Neutron scattering was invented to study materials in 1946, the year after the war. There were elements that were discovered using here. The birth of health physics and the study of radiation on living things started at the graphite reactor. So much of what we do at the lab today, really and truly, you can draw a direct line, a direct path back to where it all started, which was in this facility here. And I think that's something that historically, I mean, the vast majority of people just don't get to understand. I certainly didn't understand that until I started working at the lab, to be honest. And I've lived here all my life. You know, my grandfather brought me on family days to the lab. The first time I came back to this building when I started was probably since I had been 12 years old. I'd say that's about how old I was when my grandfather brought me to see the graphite reactor for the first time. So here's an example, Ray, of what you can do virtually that you certainly couldn't ever do in person, and then a stand up here with the mannequins. You know, you can't get access this close to the wall, but just for reference, just so people understand what the workers accomplished. This is the wall with 1,248 different ports. They would push these 4-inch slugs that were filled with uranium, aluminum clad, into a certain geometric formation within this 24-foot graphite cube to initiate a nuclear reaction, a chain reaction. When those slugs were irradiated for a certain period of time, they'd push them out the back. They'd fall and they would cool in a pool. After they'd cooled to a certain point, they'd be removed and chemically processed to remove what they were trying to produce, which was plutonium. So they were able to demonstrate the production of plutonium for the first time here. I think we're talking about microgram quantities, but it proved that it could be scaled up at Hanford, which led to the plutonium that was produced at an industrial scale in Hanford and led to the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. Am I right there on my history, fellas?
You got it. Absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
That's nutshell history as best as I can do it right there.
Well, and also I want to mention here, I think this is a good point to mention this, that if people are really interested in what it was like that night that it went critical the very first time, they can go to the Center for Oak Ridge Oral History archive and look for an interview with John Gillette. John Gillette, I interviewed John, gosh, years ago for the very first Secret City film that I did, and he was on staff that night. He was working that night that it went critical, and he tells the story about what it was like to be there that night and what happened. So
I will definitely do that. You've I can't wait to hear that. That's got to be a great story.
I interviewed John a couple of different times, but the very first one that I did was that was the point that he told that story. So anyway,
I can't wait to hear it now. I mean, it's something that, you don't get to hear that. There's nobody you can call and ask that anymore.
Yep.
You know,
Yep, exactly.
So there's an example of my poor navigational skills using a Matterport. But I do want to go up the stairs because this is the closest thing I think that exists to a time machine. I went downstairs again. I apologize. When you're doing things in a hurry, this is what happens. Let me navigate once again.
No problem.
Here we go. There. So we're going upstairs to the control room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, I feel like every time I walk up here, I'm walking back to 1943. Truly a time machine, because nothing's changed in here really since then. The graphite reactor operated continuously for 20 years. This is what it was like. And when you get a chance to visit, HIFER, our high flux isotope reactor, which was built in 1965, but its advancement in its control room is far surpasses the technologies you see here for sure. You can go over here and actually see the logbook. And if I could zoom in, it moved. I apologize, guys, for my poor navigational skills, but I wanted to show folks how they can look at the logbook for where it was recorded.
Yeah.
That it went critical. So if you see there, the circle says critical reached. It's at 5:04 a.m., I believe, on November 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just it says right here, on the, I don't have to try to zoom in there and see the writing. But it's just such an important piece of history for so much about who we are and what we're doing at the lab today. You can come back here and look at all the gauges and graphs and see how they monitored this instrument they created, looking at the things they thought were the most important, and it operated successfully for 20 years. You can come back here to this room, which accesses the side wall of the graphite reactor, and see these ports that were used for isotope production. And on different floors above here, they were used for experiments on, and we had a mouse house, which studied effects on living creatures, how radiation affected living things. So just such a, I don't want to get too much into history because, again, this is designed to whet people's appetite to come back and learn more. Certainly, anything you all want to add before we go to our next facility?
I would just, I would add that this graphite reactor is a National Historical Landmark. It's a part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. And at some point, we're hoping to be able to provide even more public access than we have in the past. But for right now, this virtual tour is the way that people can actually experience this historical landmark. And I'm just really pleased to see this capability out there where folks can get to it, because the graphite reactor is truly, there you go, you're looking at the plaque. Yeah. Where it was recognized in, I think, 1966 as a National Historical Landmark.
That's right, and we're so proud of it because, I mean, it's not just the history of the graphite reactor. It's what it started that's still ongoing today. It's so important to the science and research that it's helping Oak Ridge National Lab change the world for the better today. It started here, which is why I like to start my tours here.
Now, Wade, let me ask you. So there's a variety of these. I mean, we're running about 40 minutes now, but I wanted to get to another one. But there's a variety of these types of tours that are available on that website.
Absolutely. Correct? Yeah. And I know it went a little long there because I get excited when I start getting to show people really great things. If you click on the virtual tours option, this tab at the top, you can see all of the facilities for which we have virtual tours right now. And we're adding facilities and in going throughout the facilities. For example, even in Graphite Reactor, we're going to be coming back and adding informational points, and continuing to build this out just to be able to teach people more and more about what they're seeing. But yes,
go ahead. Wait, if you would, as Keith noted, we're running on time here, but let's get at least two more, and then if you've got another one you want to see, we'll do it. But I want them to see the church, and you don't have to spend a lot of time there. Just get us inside the church so they can see that it's actually there. And then, of course, you want to talk about supercomputers a bit. So let's go to the church.
Let's go to the church. So you click on virtual tours and click on New Bethel Baptist Church Tour. It'll take you right there. And so, again, just click on the play button for the Matterport photography. It'll show you the dollhouse view, and it'll walk you right through where we began the photography. But, gentlemen, I've been in this building, but you certainly know more about it. Is there anything you all want to share with us about this before we go look at other facilities?
Or raise the expert.
I would just say this is one of two remaining church buildings that we have that was here prior to the Manhattan Project. And this one, the New Bethel Church, has a unique feature in the cemetery that's there with it. Now, the other church that's available is over at Wheat, the George Jones Memorial Baptist Church, and the cemetery there. Just recently, we added a memorial to the Roberts family cemetery over there, a huge rock. Ralph Martin did that. But back to this one, the thing that's unique here, and Nick Fielder, who used to be the state archaeological officer, just posted something on Facebook about this a few days ago. There are little covered structures out in the graveyard that cover the graves. Normally those graves are of infant babies, small children. And it's some of the best examples of that, those little covered structures that you'll see anywhere. And it's right out there, right beside the church. And of course, the church building has been maintained well and is it's included on the DOE public tours. But again, right now, this is the only way you can see it is through these virtual tours.
That's right. Such an important piece of history. You know, our history is focused on really starting in 1942. This is the one piece that we have on campus that ties us back to what Oak Ridge was like before 1942, right? And we
Yep.
can't lose that. It's too important to who we are as a people, as East Tennesseans, and to what it was like before World War II. Very important points. So you're right, Ray. I want to respect time here, and I want to go make sure we hit a couple different facilities left. We always like to show the supercomputer, but there's also, I want to show the carbon fiber technology facility simply because of how to navigate it. Because there's the best way to navigate that. It's a little bit different than the self-guided way. So we can go to, click on virtual tours. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can go back to the map and click on the building. The easiest way to know where you're going would just be to click on computational sciences tour. And it will take you to the building on campus that we have where our supercomputers are located. And that not only is that for Summit, which is our existing operating supercomputer, which is currently ranked as the second fastest supercomputer in the world. It was first in the world for a year and a half. But also this shows you where Frontier is being constructed. Frontier will be our first exascale computer. Exascale means 10 to the 18th. That means this machine is going to be able to do 10 to the 18th, at least, equations, that's multipliers or additions, per second. If everybody, well, I'll show you this when we get to Summit because it's pertinent to a current machine that's operating right now. But this is where Frontier is going to be located. It will be commissioned and functional either in late 21 or in 2022 as well. But this whole floor has been gutted and they're building Frontier right now. This is where Titan was. Titan was decommissioned last year, and even when it was operational for 7 years, and even when it was decommissioned, it was the 9th fastest computer in the world. And think about having your cell phone for 7 years. You know, how good is a 7-year-old cell phone these days? I mean, they won't even update the software on them anymore, right? So to have a computer that was 7 years old that was still the 9th fastest in the world is pretty remarkable for Titan. But still, you know, for efficiency purposes and the computing power, you know, what you can build today so far surpasses what Titan was able to do. So Summit is located just down the hall from where Titan is, or where Frontier is going to be. So we're going to go down the hall and take a left, and you'll see this is where Summit is. You click on these points. This will show you just the history, you know, how it was constructed, what it's constructed of. That's the point of trying to do, obviously, as much education here as we can. And so this is, if we were fortunate enough to do an on-site tour today, this is where you would stand to be able to look at Summit. Now, there's a big difference in Titan and Summit. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but it's such an interesting point, I have to point it out. Titan sat on an elevated floor and was air-cooled. All the cabinets that held the processors that were linked and that created the supercomputer, they were air-cooled. So the air would go through chillers and come through the floor and through these machines to remove the heat. Well, water is a much more efficient coolant than air is. So as we go into this machine, I want to show you something very important to the design of Summit, which makes it much different. You can't do this in person. We're now inside this facility, and access is very limited, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But the biggest difference in design, one of the biggest differences in design for modern day supercomputers versus what they were just 7 years ago is this. It's water cooled. You have roughly the equivalent to a swimming pool's worth of water circulating overhead and into these incredibly sophisticated machines. You know, the world's second fastest supercomputer, has a swimming pool's worth of water all around it. And you don't think that water and this much electricity would go together. But it's just so much more effective and efficient at pulling heat out of these machines. If you open up one of these cabinets, this is what you're going to see. you're going to see a mixture of CPUs and GPUs. GPUs are gaming processor units that are linked together. You know, so you have all these processors that are linked in parallel computing, and that's really all a supercomputer is. You just have the number. You're talking about thousands and thousands of processors. They're all communicating together at the same time. That's a supercomputer. The space that we're talking about that Summit occupies is roughly the equivalent of about 2 basketball courts. And you get an idea once you step into here of how big it is. This is a computer. This is also, I'd like to note, a user facility, which means anybody in the world can submit a proposal and apply for time on a nodal time, I think is the terminology that they use to basically lease time. It's not leased, it's free if you'll publish your research. And that's what makes this a user facility that anybody in the world could come here and use. And a lot of our facilities, particularly that we have virtual tours of, are of user facilities. So I don't want to get too much into detail there. There's one more place I want to show you because of how it's navigated. But before I leave, gentlemen, any questions you want to ask about Summit before we go to the next place?
I'll just make one quick comment. We started this session today talking about parallel processes. Keith, you remember 3 or 4 processes General Groves was using and the virus? Think about this. We're talking about how many thousands of parallel processes going on simultaneously.
Yep.
So just wrap your mind around that.
It's really difficult to wrap your mind around it. And when people come in and say, why are we in this race to have the fastest computer? You know, what's the point? The point is because we're able to collect enormous, mind-boggling data sets now that people aren't capable of analyzing in a time frame that's usable at all. So it takes this kind of computing power to be able to analyze this amount of data to come to conclusions in a usable time frame. So here's the best bottom line analogy that I think Jeff Nichols, who's the associate lab director for our computational sciences, came up with. I don't know if it's him or not, but I've heard him use it many times. If everybody on Earth solved an equation, just a multiplication or an addition problem, every second for roughly 300 days, we could, as an entire planet of people, do what Summit is capable of doing in 1 second.
Wow.
That gives you an idea of the computing power of this machine. But it's neat because
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Wade. It brings me back to, because we've got this kind of technology, because we've got this kind of capability, people are keeping asking the question, you know, we got these doubters talking about the vaccine for COVID. How were we able to get it done in as fast of a time as we can? It's because of technology. It's because we've got this kind of technology that we've never had before that allowed us to be, to literally save lives.
Yes.
Because of the technology. And if there's any reason why we should want and be proud of what's happening at the lab, it's to save lives. That's one of the reasons, you know? So
absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because it's so true. The vaccines now are a huge technological leap that I think the full implications of what they're going to be able to treat really are just now beginning to be realized, you know, from cancers to all kinds of conditions. You know, the mRNA vaccines are a huge leap in technology. And you're right. It's because of facilities like this that make those advances possible. Right? And that's why we invest what we invest as a country into these types of facilities that you find at the lab.
Yeah.
So, and that's why we want to show them off, is to build awareness and help people appreciate, you know, the importance of what we're doing in investing as a country into research and development on the science side.
Absolutely.
There's one more place I want to show you, and we're not going to go into depth. It's just more for a navigational point because some of the tours are easier to navigate by just hitting play. And let me show you what I mean by that. So if you go to the Carbon Fiber Technology Facility, which is located in the Horizon Center, on Highway 90, in the Gullhar Road between I-40 and Oak Ridge, you can navigate this. You can, you can do what we've been doing. You can click on the points and go from here to there. But it's much easier to navigate and get an idea of what you're looking at if you just come down here to the bottom left corner and hit play. And it'll take you to the beginning of what is truly a traditional manufacturing line. And it will walk you through point by point. And if you ever see anything that you want to know more about, you just click the mouse, click on the point of information you want to learn. What in the world is that? Well, you can click on this and it'll tell you exactly what it is. And then you can resume your tour by just clicking play again. I accidentally started it over there, but you just hit click play again and it'll take you along here. And one of the things I definitely wanted to show you guys, went too far, is if you're going here, there's a video here that I really want you to look at. Anybody watching this podcast, if you come to this point, just from the beginning, there's a video right here. And it is ORNL in the fight against COVID. This was done back in the spring, just looking at the areas that we started. It's about it's a short video, obviously, but it talks about how we're engaged in the fight. And I would just want to encourage everyone to watch that because it's really inspirational. And it talks about how we started this tour was if we can't get involved in our moonshot now as a laboratory, when will we ever? Mm-hmm. And thank goodness we have in so many different ways. And in this line, this manufacturing line here is just one of the ways that we were able to engage in the fight against COVID. But this video is so great about telling that story. So I'd encourage everyone to go there. But if you want to see all about the carbon fiber technology facility, just click on this, click on play. It'll walk you right through. You can pause it, ask anything you want to see about it at any time, and then resume your tour. If you try to walk through it, it would be difficult to make it make sense because it's truly walking you through a traditional industrial manufacturing line that produces carbon fiber in new and innovative ways. Gentlemen, hopefully that gives you a peek and just hopefully whets people's appetites to want to come back and learn more. That was the whole point today, not to really teach, but just to show what we've built out and to hopefully get people to come back and learn more about what's going on at Oak Ridge National Lab.
It's sure done that, Wade. We appreciate you taking the time to give this demonstration. And I hope the people who are looking at this will just quickly go. Again, you just go to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory website and wave your mouse over about us and come right down to the virtual tours. And there you are, right in the middle of it. And just have fun learning about the technology available and the history of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
That's right.
Keith, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wade. And we really appreciate, as Ray said, what you provided, and encourage people to go visit the website and explore some more on their own. Ray, it's almost Christmas. I think we're going to take a couple of weeks off for the holidays, and we'll be back in January with a new episode and a new series of episodes of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. So, Wade and Ray, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll see y'all again next year.
Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Merry Christmas to all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.